Deadman Annihilation is almost here, and before you even log in, there's one decision you need to make. Which combat bracket will you be playing in? In this video, I'll break down what each bracket actually feels like to play in, and which builds make the most sense depending on whether you want to survive, PK, or just have fun. Each combat bracket plays very differently, and the choice you make here will define your entire Deadman experience. At the highest bracket, you're dealing with maxed PKers and best in slot gear actively hunting players. In the lower brackets, you're safer, but you're trading that safety for lower XP and drop multipliers. Like most PvP decisions, it all comes down to risk versus reward. If this is your first Deadman mode and your main goal is earning some reward points, I strongly recommend sticking to the 1 to 60 or the 61 to 80 brackets. You'll still run into PKers, but far fewer of them, and they won't be nearly as geared or optimized. If you want the full Deadman experience though, escaping PKers, fighting at breaches, and killing bosses, the higher brackets are where that chaos really happens. So before anything else, ask yourself whether you want consistency, chaos, or constant PvP. This Deadman is different from previous seasons for one big reason: the Ruinous Prayer Book. These prayers are going to give low defense builds stronger versions of Piety, Rigor, and Augury, making them an even stronger powerhouse for the mid-tier brackets. There is also a new sigil coming to Deadman Annihilation, called the Sigil of Eternal Belief. This stops your prayer from being drained naturally, but other draining effects such as Smite will still work. Having this as a permanent unlock will be top priority for both PVMers and PvPers. Because prayer drain is normally one of the biggest limiting factors in both PVM and PvP, this sigil completely changes how long you can stay active. Now, let's get into the account builds. For those of you out there who don't want to PK and want to try and stay alive, here's some defense forward builds to consider for optimizing your survivability. I'm not expecting anyone to copy these exactly. Think of these as templates you can modify based on your goals. These builds focus on keeping HP and defense high while keeping prayer and melees low. This allows for higher magic and range levels too, which gives you a better chance against PKers. When it comes to the top bracket, 99 all combats is your best option regardless of what you're trying to do. Next up is possibly the most interesting build for these brackets: Pures. I'll split pure builds into two parts. First, the 1 to 60 and 61 to 80 brackets, where glass cannon builds really shine. For the first bracket, your best bet is probably a Gmaul build, as most people here will have low defense, and you want to have as many strength levels as you can to hit higher. In the next bracket, you have more options and combat levels to mess around with. You can create some truly overpowered builds with the Ruinous Prayers that will shred others. These builds are also quite viable for PVMing as well, especially with all the sigils to buff you, and having 60 attack you can equip some decent weapons as well. The pure builds in 81 to 95 bracket are really strong too. There's a good reason they created this bracket, as this is where the max pure builds will stay. But you will soon see that pures aren't the only viable option in this bracket and may not even be the strongest build. The main differences between these builds are based around the prayer levels and what Ruinous Prayers you want to have unlocked. The minimal accuracy difference between a traditional pure with 99 attack and a pure with Ruinous Prayers is well worth the dip in attack levels. And as you can see, you can even have 82 attack, allowing you to use the Fang against those higher defense foes. Now, before we move on to the 50 defense and Moon's Gear builds, there's one more category that's absolutely worth talking about: 20 defense builds using Ancient Warrior weaponry. The first 20 defense build sits right around 80 combat, and it's built specifically around one weapon, the Statius Warhammer. At this combat level, you don't have access to the full Ancient arsenal, but the Warhammer alone is already a massive threat. The spec hits incredibly hard, lowers defense, and pairs really well with the high strength and Ruinous Prayers available in this bracket. What makes this build so strong is that 20 defense gives you access to better gear and survivability than a pure, while still keeping your combat level low enough to fight pures and lower defense accounts. It's not a pure PK build, but it's extremely dangerous if someone underestimates you. Once you move into the 81 to 95 bracket, the 20 defense build becomes even more interesting. At around 95 combat, you gain access to the full Ancient Warrior weapon set, not just the Statius. the entire arsenal. This turns the build into a true hybrid PK account. We've got multiple spec options, strong melee pressure, and the ability to adapt depending on who you're fighting. Compared to a pure, you're trading a bit of max hit for significantly more survivability and flexibility using better gear. In this bracket especially, where you're fighting maxed pures, ruinous prayer builds, and even some tankier setups, that extra defense can be the difference between surviving a fight and getting sent back to Lumbee. So if you like high risk PvP but don't want to commit to a full 50 defense build, 20 defense with ancient warrior weapons sits right in the middle. Dangerous, flexible, and very underrated. With that covered, let's move on to the Moon's Gear and 50 defense builds where things get even more flexible. These builds are interesting because they break the usual pure versus main idea and also allow you to equip the ancient warrior armors too. They only become viable in the 81 to 95 bracket. However, there is one build in the 61 to 80 bracket that seems interesting enough to compete with the pures of that bracket. The Adalat build. With 50 defense, attack, and strength, you'll be able to use an Adalat with a Gmaul. The extra defense and the burn effects from this set will allow you to compete with the pures of this bracket, although your gear will probably be more expensive on average. This setup is also great for breach monsters and general PVM too. Then, we have the 81 to 95 bracket, where there are many variations of the 50 defense build, but again revolve around your prayer level for ruinous prayers, but also your attack level this time too. The choices are boiled down to, do you want ruinous prayers or not, and if so, dragon weapons with Adalat or Gmaul with Adalat. If you end up not taking ruinous prayers, you can have a lot more attack, allowing you to use better spec weapons and melee weapons. Personally, I'm going to start in the 81 to 95 combat bracket with this build here. This gives me access to strong dragon weapons, most ruinous prayers, and enough damage to defend myself. From there, I'll likely move up into a max build later in the season. I hope you found the build or two interesting and maybe even going for one of these in your Deadman run, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to check out my other Deadman videos if you like this one, and stay tuned for more Deadman Annihilation content. Thanks for watching!